During the late evening hours of August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died at her Brentwood home in Los Angeles due to a drug overdose. This video is a view of Marilyn's former neighborhood, as seen heading southeast on South Carmelina Avenue. At the suggestion of her psychiatrist, Ralph Greenson, in February of that year, Monroe purchased a one-story Spanish colonial revival home for $77,500. It was the only house Marilyn ever owned, and was a modest one-story structure, having 2,900 square feet of interior space, and sat on a small half-acre lot. However, it did have a nice backyard with a kidney-shaped swimming pool. Just a few minutes later, and a few blocks away from Sunset Boulevard, there is a short, dead-end street to the left, where the movie icon took her last breath. At the end of the cul-de-sac and to the left lived Marilyn Monroe at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive. The house is barely visible due to the 8-foot wall and the jungle-like overgrown foliage on the other side. An indication, however, that this was in fact Monroe's house are the numbers affixed to the white outer wall, displaying Marilyn's neighbor's address. Hers to the left is 12305. The only part of the house visible from the street is the corner of an eave, barely showing a bit of the red clay tile roof of her Spanish hacienda-styled home. So paying a visit would probably be disappointing. Surely wanting to keep Monroe in his grasp, Greenson's maid, Eunice Murray, hand-picked the house just a couple of miles from the psychiatrist's home. She then essentially became Greenson's spy, watching Marilyn's every move while reporting back to him. Greenson bought Murray's house after the war and promised to keep her on as his maid. So she was intensely loyal to him, and he in turn recommended her to Monroe. When Marilyn left Hollywood for New York in 1955, she saw Milton Greene's psychiatrist Margaret Hohenberg before she switched to Marion Criss in 1957. When Monroe moved back to LA for the filming of Let's Make Love, Criss recommended Greenson. Greenson attended to Monroe from February of 1960 until her death. She saw him often at his office and at his home in nearby Beverly Hills, where she was accepted as family. He dismissed all her close contacts, including her masseur and confidant Ralph Roberts, claiming that one Ralph should be enough for Monroe. He also introduced Marilyn to internist Hyman Engelberg, and both prescribed her strong sedatives for sleep. Monroe first started taking sleeping pills in the early 50s, with the help of columnist Sidney Skalski, who had his office inside Schwab's pharmacy in Hollywood. Later, business partner Milton Greene helped her get pills, followed by Greenson and Engelberg. Monroe suffered from chronic insomnia due to the stresses created by the movie business. Despite her endometriosis and problems sleeping, 1962 looked bright for Marilyn. After divorcing Arthur Miller in 1961, she rekindled her relationship with her second husband, Joe DiMaggio. The baseball star was smitten by Monroe and never forgot her. But now he had to accept the renewed romance under her terms. He was less controlling, and Marilyn liked what she saw. So the couple planned to re-wed on August 8th. Monroe's professional life was also blooming. She started filming Something's Got to Give on April 23, 1962, and was advised of a possible film after that called I Love Louisa, also with Dean Martin. Her and Sidney Skalski were looking to produce the Jean Harlow story as well, with her in the leading role. Monroe slimmed down and looked stunning. Then she left the set of Something's Got to Give to sing Happy Birthday to President Kennedy on May 19th at Madison Square Garden in New York. Monroe's health was failing her, though, and she was missing time on the set. Meanwhile, Fox was bruising from major losses from Liz Taylor's Cleopatra and was cutting costs. So Monroe was fired on June 7th of that year. In retrospect, Monroe's layoff was foolish and rash. She was still a huge box office draw and came relatively cheap at $100,000 per picture. In fact, Fox considered Lee Remick as her replacement, and she garnered almost as much as Monroe at $80,000. Furthermore, leading man Dean Martin refused to return if Marilyn was not rehired. Fox also realized they already had 2 months of filming in the books, so they upped Monroe's salary to $250,000 and hired her preferred director, Gene Negulesco, who guided her in How to Marry a Millionaire. He gleamingly described the starlet as a hurricane of glamour. They would restart the movie in October, and on Wednesday, August 1st, Marilyn was optimistic again. For now, though, her immediate itinerary was to order wine, sandwiches, and salads from Briggs on San Vicente Boulevard for her upcoming wedding just a week away. Joe would arrive on Monday, Then they'd head off to New York after the wedding on Wednesday. Meanwhile, that day she had a 2-hour psychotherapy session with Greenson and a so-called vitamin shot from Dr. Engelberg at her house. Monroe was stressed because she fired the ever-controlling and deceptive Eunice Murray, who was stealing her mail, treating her close friends rudely, and simply would not leave her side, even considering to cancel her European vacation to keep watch on Marilyn. Annoyed and bored with Eunice, Saturday the 4th would be Murray's last day. The last straw for Marilyn was that Greenson and Murray tried to get rid of DiMaggio too. So after marrying Joe, she planned to disconnect from Greenson's tight grip on her. So, after the forthcoming marriage, Marilyn could confidently dispense of Ralph Greenson, who had been manipulating her, gaslighting, and separating Monroe from the people she loved. Defending Marilyn's decision, Ralph Roberts felt that the drugs were being used by Greenson and Engelberg to control and isolate her. In the meantime, on Thursday, Monroe ordered a bedside table at the Mart and told the owner that she was going to marry someone she was married to before. That day, she also saw Greenson for a session, and at 6 p.m. had her longtime Hollywood makeup and wardrobe professionals, Alan Snyder and Marjorie Plesher, respectively, over for caviar and champagne. They said Monroe was happy, optimistic, radiant, and in good health. Then, on Friday the 3rd, Marilyn spent 90 minutes in session with Greenson and received a shot from Engelberg at home. He also gave Monroe a prescription for 25 Nembutal capsules. This was added to the chloral hydrate caps called knockout pills, prescribed by Greenson to wean her off the barbiturates she had. Dr. Lee Siegel at Fox also refilled a July 25th prescription of Nembutal on August 3rd. Neither of the three doctors seemed to communicate to each other about the refills. Engelberg's injection seemed to elevate Marilyn's mood. On the phone, she talked to longtime friend Norman Roston, who said she was acting high, bubbly, and breathless. Feeling better than ever, she was excited about getting back to work soon, finishing remodeling her house, and getting new film offers. She also talked to fashion designer John Louise about her wedding dress, a reporter about an Esquire cover, and looked forward to seeing the Strasbergs in New York. Also on Friday, composer Jules Stein called her to do a movie called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, for which she was excited to do. Then Marilyn went over to Frank's nursery to order trees and plants for the outdoor wedding at her home. Then, after having dinner together, Monroe had her publicist, Pat Newcomb, spend the night at her house. Pat had bronchitis, and Marilyn said some sunshine and privacy would do her good. Then on Saturday, August 4th, Eunice Murray arrived for her last day of work at 8 a.m. Then Marilyn came to the kitchen at 9, barely sleeping the night before. Monroe then met with Fox photographer Lawrence Schiller and signed for the delivery of her bedside table and the trees from the nursery. She also took Ralph Roberts' call about their barbecue planned for Sunday evening, and Sidney Skalski called about meeting with her for the Harlow project. Marilyn's home was taking shape, and so was her personal and professional life. Pat Newcomb awoke at noon and described Marilyn as surly and sarcastic, resentful that Pat slept well, but she didn't. In the meantime, at 1 o'clock, Greenson arrived and gave Marilyn a therapy session in her bedroom. Joe DiMaggio's son called at 2 p.m. but was turned away by Eunice. At 3, Greenson told Newcomb to leave because Murray was going to take Marilyn, who was upset, out to the beach, and Greenson went home. Murray took Monroe to Peter Lawford's beach house where she watched a volleyball game. Producer William Asher, visiting Lawford, said Monroe looked drugged and she left at 4. Greenson returned to Monroe's house at 4:30 when Joe DiMaggio Jr. called again, but was rebuffed by Eunice. Ralph gave Marilyn another session, then Peter Lawford called at 5 asking Marilyn to come back, but she declined. Arthur Miller's father, Isidore, called just after 5, and Ralph Roberts at 5:45, but both were rejected by Murray and Greenson respectively. Greenson then supposedly left at 7:15, and Joe Jr. finally got through to Marilyn at 7:25 and described her as being alert and happy. At 7:45, Lawford called again, but was alarmed by Marilyn's slurred speech. Barely breathing, Marilyn said, quote, "Say goodbye to Pat, say goodbye to the president, and say goodbye to yourself because you're a nice guy." Then she whispered twice, I'll see. Incidentally, Monroe was referring in her statement to Lawford's wife Pat, who was also President Kennedy's sister. Deeply worried and shaken by the call, Lawford frantically phoned his manager Milton Ebbins, who advised him not to see Monroe because of a possible scandal in the media. So Evans summoned Milton Rudin, Monroe's attorney, who himself called Eunice Murray at 8:30 p.m. to check on Marilyn. She returned after only 4 minutes and said all was okay, but Rudin seriously doubted Murray's statement. The sad truth came out when at 10:30 p.m., producer Arthur Jacobs received a call from Rudin. Jacobs was at the Hollywood Bowl attending a concert, and to his shock, Rudin said Marilyn was dead. Rudin apparently received a call from his brother-in-law, Ralph Greenson, which was, of course, Monroe's psychiatrist. But contrary to Rudin's account, Eunice Murray said she woke up at 3 a.m. to check on Monroe. She said she saw a light shining under her locked door and used a fireplace poker to part the drapes from a barred window. She saw Marilyn facing down in her bed, so Greenson broke an unbarred window, thereby entering the bedroom. Devastated, Greenson turned to Eunice Murray and told her that Marilyn Monroe was dead. Greenson called the police at 4:25 Sunday morning, and they arrived 10 minutes later. Murray told them that she called Greenson at midnight, then changed the time to 3 a.m. Greenson insisted it was midnight. Some speculate that Greenson never left Monroe's house at 7:15 but stayed. Either way, this is what's known. Monroe became groggy after Greenson's first visit at 1 p.m. Then, according to DiMaggio Jr., she was alert and happy at 7:25 p.m. But by 7:45 p.m., Lawford was alarmed by Marilyn's drugged behavior. This means that Monroe was probably administered a drug by Greenson around 7:15. Then Lawford got Rudin to check on Marilyn at 8:30 p.m. when Eunice Murray said she was okay. Murray probably at this point notices Monroe was in trouble and summons Greenson, whether he was on site or not. He notices she's comatose or dead and calls Dr. Engelberg, but neither are able to revive her. Greenson, Engelberg, and Murray then discuss what to do, and at 10 p.m. Greenson calls his brother-in-law and Monroe's attorney, Milton Rudin. Rudin, at home, phones Arthur Jacobs and informs him of Marilyn's death. Then Rudin hurries to 5th Helena Drive. Jacobs leaves the Hollywood Bowl and heads to Monroe's house. Lawford keeps inquiring, and at 1:30 a.m., Rudin tells Peter's manager Milton Evans of the tragedy, and he tells Lawford. Later, the coroner's and toxicology reports showed Monroe had 8 milligrams of chloral hydrate and 4.5 milligrams of Nembutal in her blood, plus an additional 13 milligrams of Nembutal in her liver. This means Monroe was metabolizing the Nembutal throughout the day, and most of it was being excreted through the liver. It also shows that the chloral hydrate was given to Monroe after the Nembutal, since it was all still in the bloodstream. The report also showed that her colon had notable congestion and a purplish discoloration, consistent with an enema being used for the administration of the chloral hydrate. This was probably administered by Murray, on orders by Greenson around 7:15 p.m. The tragedy is that Greenson had no idea that Engelberg prescribed more Nembutal to Monroe on August 3rd, while Greenson refilled her chloral hydrate capsules on July 31st. So Marilyn surely died because chloral hydrate impairs the ability of Nembutal to be metabolized, since a lethal dose of 4.5 milligrams were still in Marilyn's blood. Marilyn's body was able to metabolize the Nembutal throughout the day, but the chloral hydrate put that to an end and killed her. Another strange occurrence is that Eunice Murray was using the washing machine when the police arrived at 4:35 a.m. on Sunday. This bolsters the theory that Monroe expelled the enema upon death, and Murray was destroying evidence. It also supports Jacob's description of the scene to his wife Natalie as being something horrible. Meanwhile, Murray's claim that she saw a light shine from under Marilyn's bedroom door and that it was locked seems untrue. Monroe hated to have locks on doors since being imprisoned at an asylum in New York, and the thick carpet recently installed wouldn't allow light to pass under it. And as far as parting the drapes with a poker, that would be impossible, because Ralph Roberts installed thick black sheets across the entire width of both bedroom walls that had windows to help Marilyn sleep. And unbeknownst to the police, they were neatly folded in a corner of the room to avoid suspicion. So the comments about seeing Monroe lying in bed through the window couldn't happen as described, and the breaking of the unbarred window was a distraction since Marilyn's bedroom door didn't have a lock. And Marilyn's death was caused by extreme negligence at best by those who claimed to help her. In her last days, Marilyn Monroe said, "There's a future out there and I want to live it." She also proclaimed that we should all have fun while we're not too old to enjoy it. She finally had her own house that was becoming what she envisioned, with Mexican furniture and new citrus trees being planted. She was finishing out her contract with Fox and was getting some promising new acting offers. She was soon to shake loose from the chains of Greenson and Murray and marry a man who truly loved her and looked out for her. If not more clear, when detectives were scouring her house for a suicide note, they failed to find a folded letter tucked in her address book. It was written to Joe DiMaggio, and it read, quote, "If I can only succeed in making you happy, I will have succeeded in the biggest and most difficult thing there is. That is to make one person completely happy. Your happiness means my happiness." Unquote. The word "and" was written at the end of the letter, meaning Marilyn was going to continue her thoughts. She certainly had more to say to her former and next husband-to-be, but she also had much more to share with the world. Fortunately, we have all the precious memories she gave us in the form of her wonderful movies and images, and she will forever be loved by her adoring fans.